Folks, while the events in Japan and the Middle East are driving gas prices up and driving the stock market down, there are other battles on Capitol Hill that could affect your pocketbook. At the center of those fights is my next guest, the woman sitting next to me right now. Look at her. She appears to be very innocent, but to Republicans on the Capitol Hill, she's the devil incarnate. What is going on when it comes to Elizabeth Warren and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau? She's no stranger to Washington Watch. Welcome back to the show.
It's good to be here.
Okay, so it clearly was controversial getting you into the position, creating this particular bureau, and Republicans are still after you. They want to cut your budget. I've read all kinds of different comments where they say that you are unaccountable. This is a dangerous bureaucracy. Why are you scaring these folks to death?
You know, I think mostly just because we're talking about some pretty basic things, and that is that when you go out there to get a mortgage or go get a credit card or go do any kind of financial, cash a check, the price ought to be clear up front. The risk ought to be clear up front. You ought to be able to compare 2 or 3 products. We ought to get rid of the fine print. We just want some pretty straight stuff here for families to be able to deal with. We want somebody in Washington who speaks up for families, and that's all this is about.
Now, we went through clearly a difficult time when it came to this financial market. And so when you talk about offering protection to consumers, your critics say, we don't need that. We have way too much regulation right now. But wasn't that kind of the problem before we didn't have much regulation?
Well, you know, that's the amazing part here. What we're doing with this new consumer agency is that there are 18 federal laws right now that have bits and pieces of where consumer financial protection is. And they're scattered among 7 different agencies. And for none of those 7 agencies is consumer and consumer protection number 1. In fact, for most of them, it's not even number 2 or number 3. So we've got these laws. We kind of have a bunch of different people who are supposed to enforce them. What the consumer agency is about is to say, hey, look, that's ineffective. It's inefficient. It's duplicative. It's just not where we need to be. Let's take all that, scissor it out of the other agencies, put it all in one agency, and then let's hold that one agency accountable. Give it to someone who really wants to do the work, and then hold them responsible for doing the work.
So we no longer have all of these different folks handling different aspects, and so it's now centralized.
That's the idea behind it. We think we can do it cheaper. We think we can do it more effectively, and that's what some people don't like.
Republicans also do not like the settlement that you brokered with the state's attorney generals as it relates to mortgages. Explain how is that going to help the average person?
So now I have to say here, Roland, what's going on is an ongoing law enforcement action.
Okay.
And we haven't brokered anything. What we've done that I think is really important here is that the Department of Justice, that's leading a financial fraud enforcement task force, and Secretary of the Treasury and some of the other agencies have turned to this little consumer agency. You know, we're not even set up yet. We don't even have any legal authority, and they've asked us for advice. And I've got to tell you, I'm glad to be there on behalf of American families to say, here's how we look at this from the perspective of homeowners, from the perspective of people who live in communities, from the perspective of people who really need to see this economy going again on jobs, and to offer that advice. But the Department of Justice, they're going to lead the investigation.
Is the real issue here that, I mean, typically when we talk about finances in Washington, D.C., you're largely dealing with people who have come from Wall Street, who have that sort of background. My criticism always has been it's a revolving door. And so that's not your background. And so could that very well be the danger here in that it's not like you have many buddies on Wall Street, so therefore you're looking for that payday to go work for some of these major firms. And so therefore you have businesses as well as Republicans who are saying, oh, that's dangerous having somebody who isn't from that particular area of the country.
Well, you know, it is an interesting part of this whole back and forth has been who some of the people who've turned into our big supporters are, and that is a lot of community banks and credit unions. Yeah, they're not Wall Street either.
But community banks and credit unions are often at odds with the major banks and Wall Street firms.
That's right. And the community banks and the credit unions, the ones who are really on the front lines, trying to provide good services to their customers, a lot of them have become good partners with this new consumer agency and are really trying to help us get started and be strong, because they know ultimately if we do have a strong, diversified banking industry, meaning it doesn't all just look one way, we've really got some change here, then the answer is we better serve American families.
Well, obviously, we also saw this week where the banks have said they're going to start charging $5 for an ATM fee. And I've heard from credit unions say, look, I mean, this is why we also exist. We're not sitting here trying to fleece the average consumer. Now, you talked about the Bureau not fully being operational, but what have you been able to accomplish thus far as the interim head, if you will, of the Bureau?
All right, so we're doing three things right now. This is the most exciting part. We're building the structure. And you know, I'm starting to learn structure is really important.
Yeah.
Something that'll last.
So like a foundation with a house, kind of important.
That's exactly right. So we're really putting a structure in place that builds right from the beginning. This is about American families. We're hiring good people to come in here. People, I want to say, from all different kinds of backgrounds, and people of different ages, people who just come to this with different experiences. And can I put a little quick commercial in here?
Go ahead.
We're about to hire a bunch of people to be bank examiners. I know it doesn't sound like what you would have thought about. It's kind of a money cop. People with college degrees, but they don't have to have backgrounds in accounting. We're going to train them. We want to bring people in to help us to be a cop on the beat. So I hope people will take a look. Consumerfinance.gov. We've got it posted. It's in USA Jobs today. But this is what's fun. The people who are coming into this agency want to be there. They want to be there to be part of something bigger than themselves. And that's the other part we're doing right now. We're setting our priorities. We've got good priorities for this agency. We're going to make sure on mortgages, we're going to try to get it from a big stack of papers down to at least a smaller stack of papers. Trying to cut those credit cards down to just a couple of pages. Trying to enforce to make sure that online lenders are really still following the law. But most of all, we're going to give this place a vision. And the vision is we're here to work for American families. We're a cop on the beat for American families to make sure that everybody, no matter how big, has to follow the law.
Well, I'll tell you what, one of the things that I've always said on this show is that if you are a viewer and you want to see this kind of change, you also have to let your voice be heard. And so that is letting your members of Congress and senators know, as well as the president, look, we want this to move forward. And so I think the people who are against this, they speak very loudly, because I think the people who are for it, frankly, don't say much. And so I know you can't make a direct appeal for them to call, but I can do that. They actually want to see the kind of change. I say they get off their butts, pick that phone up, email, call, fax, do whatever to say this has to be there to protect the average consumer and not the fat cats on Wall Street.